is exactly the nature of the Qur'an demonstrating itself to be true.
Because some of it might be a lie, and like during like centuries things may change and people might add stuff, take away things. How do you know that this is actually like facts? You know?
Yeah, this is a very good point. So let's talk about firstly, how do we know it's changed or not changed, right?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahilladzi arsala rasulahu bil huda wa dinil haqq liyuzhirahu 'ala dini kullihi wa kafa billahi syahida. Asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la syarikalah wa asyhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu la nabiyya ba'da. Berjumpa lagi dengan channel saya Mars Techno. Saya doakan semoga semua sahabat dalam keadaan sehat selalu. Pada video ini kami akan menampilkan seorang ustadz yang bernama Bro Mansur yang sedang melakukan dakwah di speaker corner, menjelaskan argumentasinya tentang Islam kepada wanita non-muslim. Nah sahabat, mari kita saksikan saja video selengkapnya dan saya akan sedikit mereaksinya.
God to punish us for not doing something or doing something, it would not seem to be fair unless we know exactly what is required of us.
Okay.
Do you follow so far?
I follow.
Yeah, so this is what we're saying. To know how to worship God, it's not what I make of how I think I should worship God. It's when the Creator tells me, this is how I'm going to accept your worship.
Yeah, but you're saying the Creator's going to tell you how to worship Him, but if you can't technically communicate.
Not me personally. The
Okay.
Creator will,
But
as He has sent or raised, appointed human beings to be prophets and messengers, and each of them, they had their evidences as to how God has made them a prophet and a messenger. Because anyone can come along. Imagine someone comes along and says, I am a prophet of God, and he tells me to give you your earrings and your money and your phone and your businesses and your house keys and everything. You're going to do that? You're going to say, how are you a prophet of God? What evidence have you got? So we expect something as a matter of evidence or proof from those spokespersons who claim to be prophets of God. When they establish that I am a prophet of God, and you can see there's no reason to disbelieve in me because of the evidence I brought for you, you would then say, now I'm confident to accept what you say, because I now trust you to be a prophet and a messenger of God. When you go to a doctor, you go in trust already because there's no reason to distrust that he's a... But if you already know there's some fishy thing going on about this surgeon, and you hear from other people that this man or woman didn't even go to a medical school, didn't get a degree, never went and passed his exams, or fake, you will be very suspicious. You would not trust that person, isn't it? So a prophet and messenger is examined like that, their life, their character, and then you say, I now affirm and I accept you are a prophet of God. So if you bring the Qur'an, and this is an evidence from God that this is His revelation or communication, then I know I can trust this book. And if God says, worship me and don't worship idols, don't worship trees or stars or moons or planets or anything in creation.
Everything that's written in this book, though?
Okay, very good question. If this book is evidently demonstrated, evidently demonstrated.
How can you be so sure that all of this is true?
Very good question. And this is exactly the nature of the Qur'an demonstrating itself to be true.
Because some of it might be a lie, and like during like centuries things may change and people might add stuff, take away things. How do you know that this is actually like facts? You know?
Yeah, this is a very good point. So let's talk about firstly, how do we know it's changed or not changed, right? So the Qur'an has been transmitted from the first person that was given to the Prophet, 5 years ago. It's about 1400 years ago.
Yeah.
It was transmitted through memorization as well as in written form. We now have manuscripts from within 100 years of his time. So many manuscripts across the globe, in private hands, in museums. There's one in Birmingham University, right? Birmingham Library. There's one in Oxford. There's one in Cambridge. There's one in Vatican. There's in Russia. Everywhere around, manuscript, because Quran was transcribed and copied in large numbers so that people can have access to everywhere. It wasn't like a certain clergy had in control and they will only preach from there and you just listen and whatever I want to tell you and I have control. It wasn't like, it was in the hands of people. So it was transmitted like this, and you can go back now and look at the Quranic manuscript, and you can see, yes, you can read the Quran as you read the Quran today. Yeah?
Do you believe everything written inside?
That's the point I was going to answer. Yes, I do. But how I do that is the mechanism I'm going to share with you.
And you follow everything in this book?
I try all the best. As Muslim, they should. So some people, sometimes we fall short because of our weaknesses. So because of our desires and our shortcomings. But always then we repent to God and say, God, I'm sorry. I will try to mend myself. This is what is expected of us. Because we're not like someone who is, so perfect. We are meant to strive towards perfection. That's the whole idea of our life, our journey. That you try to strive towards perfection, and in doing so, if you fall short, but you admit and confess that you have done something wrong, and you immediately turn to God, He will say He accepts your repentance because He knows your weaknesses. So the transmission was through memorization as well. So if I were to now tell you that any chapter of the Quran, if I were to read it in the Arabic language as this Quran is, if I make a mistake, you'll find so many people correcting my mistakes. You can go to any mosques, when they read the Quran in their prayers, they 5 times a prayer Muslims pray. The morning prayer, Fajr, Maghrib and Isha, the 3 prayers, they read it aloud, the Quran. If the Imam who's leading the prayer makes some mistakes, so many people from the row, back and so on, even a young child, will correct that mistakes. That's how the Quran is being protected, because Quran has been memorized. Do you know how many hundreds and thousands, if not millions of people have memorized the Quran? Word for word, letter for letter, and they don't even speak Arabic. Millions of people, yeah? So at any one time, if you go to Muslim countries, they have special memorization school where they memorize, yeah? So I can bring someone who is a 7-year-old and memorize the whole book. I can't do it now, it's so difficult for me. I tried, right? I'm trying, make supplication for me, but I'm saying you can bring a 7-year-old who memorized the whole Quran. So you can go and trace this back a year before, a decade before, 100 years before, 200, and all the way go back. This is a living tradition. Here, in Germany, in China, in Palestine, anywhere in the world, people have always, in every generation, memorized the whole book. So that's why we can be sure that the Quran that we read today is the Quran that the Prophet left behind. Now, how do I know this Quran, all of it is from God? Because when I examine this book, you can be sure that the Quran has provided certain falsification tests and still stands to that test unfalsified. You see, if a book gives you some test of history, and you can say, if you do this, that's definitely not from God, then he will say it's not from God. To give you one example which you'd appreciate is, do you think a book from the Creator will contain mistakes? Of course not, because He's all knowledgeable. The Quran says so. If that book, this book, the Quran, was from other than God, you will find many discrepancies, many inconsistencies. Well, you have a criteria. If this book has shown some mistakes, discrepancies, contradictions, you will say, I'm sorry, this book is not from God. One criteria of falsification test. Another criteria, the Quran says, if you think this book is not from God, what you have to do is simply produce a chapter like it. If you can't do it, go and ask for help from your supporters, your people who can. And this is where the challenge is. Look here. And if you're in doubt about what we have sent down, this Quran, upon our servant, Prophet Muhammad, then produce a surah. This is a surah, each 114 surah or chapter.
Okay.
Then produce a surah like thereof, and call upon your witnesses, as I said, supporters, other than Allah, God, if you should be truthful, if your doubt is true, right? But if you don't do it, and you'll never be able to, then fear the fire whose fuel is people and stones prepared for the disbelievers, and give good tidings to those who believe, and to righteous deeds, and do righteous deeds, that there be gardens under which these rivers flow, and so on. So there's a warning and there's a glad tidings for people who believe in it. So the Quran tells you in this, very second chapter at the very beginning, if you are doubtful that this is not from God, imitate something like it. Now this is a profound falsification test the Quran offered, and it's still being offered today to falsify it. People keep on trying. The Arabs at that time were masters in the Arabic language. The Prophet Muhammad, they knew he didn't go to school to read and learn, and they knew he couldn't even read and write, let alone compose poetry. So when he brought the Quran with rhymes and rhythms, yet not prose or not poetry, and Qur'an says bring something like it, you'd expect them to able to imitate it. You know, you can imitate Shakespeare. ChatGPT can do it. Yeah, you can imitate anything in terms of literature, music, and so on. But you cannot do that. I made a video about ChatGPT imitating the Quran, and it admitted he can't do it because of the objective nature of the challenge. Yeah. So if you type in ChatGPT and the Quran, you will see my video coming up, how it is not possible for even artificial intelligence, let alone human beings, to imitate the Quran. Why? Because of the structural construction that the Quran is given. The speech, where you can imagine the speech of the Creator. He made it in such a construction that no one can imitate it. It's difficult to appreciate because literature may not be your forte. But if I were to give an analogy, maybe you can help to understand. You see these kind of building and structures that you see, right? If you are an architect, you are one of the best architects, a good professional civil engineer, architectural engineer, you're the best in town. And somebody says, you can't make a building like mine, you can't make a bridge like mine, and so on. You'd say, why not? What is so difficult about it? Because you should be able to make it. But what if they show you, this is how my building is? It's made of bricks and stones, but each one of the bricks is floating in space and not touching with the other bricks. Imagine the whole structure is like that. Every stone is actually floating with other bricks on left, right, up, down, nothing touching. You can take the brick in and out like that. It's holding the whole structure. You as an architect, can you imitate something like that? You can't. Because you don't think no one has the science and the technology to make something like this, even though it's made of bricks. The Quran, the structure of this language was constructed by the Creator in His speech in such a way, even though it's composed of Arabic letters, alphabet, but it cannot be imitated in that composition. That's the challenge of the Quran if people disbelieve it. So when we as Muslims can see in practice people are failing to imitate anything like it, the Muslims can have this confidence to say the Quran is from the Creator. Yeah? Because of how it is demonstrating itself time and time again that it cannot be composed by anything other than the Creator. I'll just give you two examples and just many other criteria. That's how our confidence in this book is like that I have to trust and take everything. So even though the Quran says like there, God created, the Creator put angels responsible for transcribing what we do, good and bad. Imagine an angel here and an angel there. I can't see the angels, but I would trust because I know everything else the Creator says, I will say this is the truth, right? There's no reason to doubt about it. So once you know something that is verifiable and you verify it, anything that is of the unseen, you can trust and rely on it. This is a take of the Muslims in which we say Islam is true because it's self-evident of its truthfulness. As a Christian, for example, we don't say Islam came as a different religion. Islam came with the same religion that came with, but because things have changed, people corrupted the message of Christ, corrupted the message of Moses, peace be upon those prophets, and that's why you have people now worshipping Christ instead, or saying God puts a rainbow in the sky because He needs to remember. These are people's corruptions.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate the knowledge.
Yeah? Take care.
Appreciate it.
Okay, take care. It's all right. It's a different explanation, but it's a sign of respect to a woman when we don't shake hands, and I'm sure you'll appreciate that. Okay, but this is for you, by the way. Take one.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, take care.
Masya Allah, sebuah video dakwah yang sangat menarik dari sebuah channel dakwah SC Dakwah mengenai dakwah di sebuah taman, menjelaskan ajaran agama Islam kepada masyarakat non-muslim yang sedang berkunjung di taman tersebut. Bro Mansur kali ini menjelaskan kepada wanita non-muslim tentang boleh atau tidaknya suatu perbuatan yang dilakukan oleh manusia. Menurut Bro Mansur, Tuhan telah memberitahu umat manusia tentang aturan yang diberikan kepada manusia melalui wahyu yang dikirimkan kepada Nabi Muhammad SAW, yaitu Al-Qur'an. Dan untuk contohnya diaplikasikan oleh Nabi Muhammad SAW yang kita sebut sebagai sunnah Nabi, dan perkataan dari Nabi Muhammad kita sebut sebagai hadis Nabi. Ketika dijelaskan Bro Mansur tentang Al-Quran, wanita tersebut mempertanyakan, apakah bukti yang menunjukkan Al-Quran itu terjaga keasliannya? Mengapa Anda begitu yakin? Dijawab oleh Bro Mansur, inilah cara Al-Quran menunjukkan secara alamiah bahwa ia memang benar. Disanggah lagi oleh wanita itu, bisa saja ada beberapa di antaranya kebohongan. Ini sudah berabad-abad. Mungkin saja ada perubahan. Orang mungkin ada yang menambah-nambahkannya. Bagaimana caramu mengetahui bahwa Al-Quran ini benar-benar sama persis? Menurut Bro Mansur, ini adalah sebuah pertanyaan yang sangat bagus. Jadi Al-Quran telah diturunkan kepada Nabi Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam 1444 tahun yang lalu. Ia diturunkan lewat penghafalan dan juga lewat tulisan. Kita sekarang punya naskah yang ada pada generasi awal 100 tahun pertama. Ada begitu banyak di seluruh dunia, di museum dan juga di perpustakaan. Salah satunya adalah di Birmingham, di perpustakaan kampus Birmingham. Satu di Oxford, satu di Cambridge, dan juga di Vatikan. Bahkan ada di Rusia. Naskah Quran tersebut, jika kita bandingkan dengan Al-Quran yang sekarang, adalah sama persis. Dan metode kedua penjagaan Al-Quran adalah dengan hafalan. Jadi orang yang hafal Al-Quran di seluruh dunia ada jutaan. Mereka dapat mengkoreksi apabila ada kesalahan tulisan di dalam Al-Quran. Jadi metode penghafalan dan penulisan ini saling melengkapi dalam menjaga Al-Quran. Nah sahabat, mungkin itu saja sedikit video reaksi dari saya. Mudah-mudahan bermanfaat. Wabillahi taufik wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.